The year was 1980 and I was 10 years old. At the time I occasionally frequented St Vincent's Primary School here in Sheffield. As I was leaving the gates of the school one day, I noticed my father there waiting for me, which was quite peculiar because my father never picked me up from school. Thought it has to be something strange, really. I soon found out that what that was when he had something to show me. And what he had to show me was just there. The company, the family business back then was moving home. We were moving to Portland Works. We're moving to Portland Works, which is quite a big thing, you know, a big thing in the family, really. This is the type of work we were doing back then, which is sort of generic trade knives from Sheffield. You see butcher's knives, cook's knives, scrapers, commando knives. All the cutlers around Sheffield were making this knives at this time. You know, but already you could see an end to this trade. You know, the orders were dwindling. It was getting less and less. So 5 years passed, and it's time for me to finish school and start my full-time employment again in the same workshop. By this time, I was lucky. My parents had sort of veered away from the trade knife of old, and we'd now designed and were making a range of custom bench-made knives, which was quite a revolutionary thing back then. You know, the cutlers made what they were told to make. What that's allowed me to do is sort of advance that even further. And what I specialise in today is the making of custom handmade knives, working together with the end user to get them their perfect knife, really, you know, sort of fit, finish, perfection, you know, everywhere along the way. In my time as sort of knife making and being a cutler, the biggest change that I've seen, really, the biggest advantage to me, has been the advent of the internet. And not only for contacting customers and my customers contacting me, but also for the vast array of materials that are available. You know, just a click away, you know, the super steels of the world and exotic timbers. Of course, sometimes with these super steels you get super problems, you know, and since man started using steel, you know, his aim has always been to attain the best from it. Flexibility, hardness, edge retention. You know, it's always been the struggle just to get the best from every piece of steel that you use. Different cultures around the world have always done this in different ways. The Europeans, shown here by the Vikings, what they became masters in was pattern welding, basically taking different grades of steel, one for flexibility, one for hardness, and actually forging them together. You know, for the Viking, the sword was everything, really. And what this next slide will show you is basically how they attempted that, or how they did it. You know, you can see the different layers of steel there at the top. These are forged into one solid bar. And then when you have the sort of 8 bars side by side there, when you've got these 8 bars, that's then forged again into the sort of basis of a sword. In the Middle East, the Saracens went about it a completely different way. What the Saracens did was that they crucible steel, they packed a crucible with iron and well, meteorite, anything, you know, the sort of charcoal, and then under extreme temperature, the carbon from the charcoal would transfer into the iron and steel is born. The samurai, again, we all know about the samurai sort of layered steel, much like the Vikings, but the true art of the Japanese swordsmith was in the heat treatment, the way they were sort of coated in clay, different grades of clay, different thicknesses of clay to attain different hardnesses, and then when red hot, quenched into cold water. What you can see an example of there is what that produces. The darker edges along the blade edge being the harder steel, the steel that will take an edge. The shinier on the back there, the tougher, it gives it its flexibility. Again, what they're looking for is the flexibility and the hardness. That's how they got about it. So what do we know? We know that to make the perfect knife, in Europe, mixed hard and tough steels, Middle East made the tough crucible steel, and Japan laminated and then specially heat treated. But surely the knife could be the one that sort of calls on all these services. You know, if you could get all this into one blade, surely that must be the one. What you see here is a friction stir welding tool. Now what this does basically is forced between a tightly fitted joint between 2 pieces of steel, and it's forced in whilst rotating. Because it's rotating, it produces heat, and then the steel around it basically becomes plasticized, you know, sort of soft to the touch almost. Once it's at the desired depth, it passes along the joint in the steel, always sort of at a controlled temperature, you know, the speed of it, and then the speed of the rotate, controlling that as it passes along, the steel in front of it becoming plasticized, the steel behind it, now one homogeneous piece of steel. What this slide shows is basically a traditional type of weld. You can see the fine grain structure on the steel on either side there, and the weld there is the sort of weakest part of this. You can see inclusions in there. You know, it's not that good a quality. As I said, the weak part of this is the welded section has taken good steel and made it not so good. This shows the same weld, the precise same weld, but it's had some of the friction stir treatment. You see the nice area across the top there? That's had a friction stir weld run through. It's actually taking that not so good steel, taking the minerals from either side and making it into a good steel again. So friction stirring does this while limited to welding only. You know, what we see there is a piece of steel, and that's had a friction stir treatment. So what you've got there is, you can see the fine carbides running all the way through. This is what the Saracens did. You can see the tempered area on the edges there, and the harder areas in the centre. As a knife maker, my sort of next step would be to get that piece of steel and turn it into a blade, processed upstairs, you know, in exactly the same way as all my blades are done so, you know, cut, shaped, ground, but obviously omitting the heat treatment process. The heat treatment process has been taken care of by that friction stirring, and it's sort of attained more from that steel than a traditional heat treatment method could have done so. There you have it, the first sort of Sheffield friction stirred knife. What's particularly nice about this knife as well is, although it is the first of a kind sort of in the town, the design of it is actually taken from the first sort of recorded entry of a Sheffield knife, the Sheffield thwittle, which was mentioned in Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, way back in the 14th century there. Thank you.